What's up, current and future disc golf addicts? Today I'm going to be taking along on a round at Immerloo Park in Arnhem, and it's going to be a little bit of a different format where I'm playing a head-to-head battle for some good old fun with Jori. The course itself is on the shorter end, but also one of the higher rated courses, if not the highest rated course in the Netherlands, especially some picturesque holes around these canals weaving through the park. Starting off on hole 1, we have a little bit of a backhand turnover, and assuming you beat those guardian trees, you should almost always have a putt at the basket. This is definitely a course you want to go as far under par as you can, but there is also some OB to be found if you are running these baskets for those ace runs. Hole 2 being a good example where if you leap left, it's very easy to find that OB, and once you actually get to see where my shot landed, you'll see just how close that OB comes into play. I think I was teetering on the edge of going OB, but barely staying in, and even Jori on his putt here, curling out, almost going out. But a good start for myself there, getting myself to 2 under. These first couple holes are especially on the easier end, and these really feel like your must-gets. But then later into the round, you have some more challenges and some more distance on these holes. Hole 3 is a little bit of an awkward hole where I'm just trying to throw a forehand at this single tree over the water that Jori ends up hitting. And if you beat that tree, you'll get relatively close to the basket. If you do saw it off early to the right, there's a bush where you most likely won't have any putt at. So definitely something where you want to err on the left side of the basket. Now we're starting to see a little bit more distance already with hole 4. Hole 4, we have a single mando that you have to pass onto the left side. And I'm just trying to throw a flat forehand, try to push most of the way. It's not the longest hole, but the basket itself is among these very young trees that make it really hard to access the basket. It's the same if you're in the trees like I am. They'll have low ceilings to contend with, and so putting can be especially challenging there. But this is one you certainly want to par and not mess around with the mando off the tee, and there's no need to cut it close either. One of the unique aspects of the course is that there's some elevation at play too, so very possible to get some nasty rollaways. This hole being a good example of it, where again relatively easy off the start, but you have to be really careful with the angle you're trying to land with on the hill. So me catching one of those early trees, I wanted to be especially careful here on the approach, but thankfully we're towards the latter end of summer here, so the grass is nice and thick to stop some of these rollaways. Hole 6, we're looking at a short little ace run. Jori giving it his best effort, just flying over the basket. Now I opt for the little bit safer forehand. Really get to see that more old school versus new school style where Jori likes to rely on his AVRs a lot. AVRs, rocks, and destroyers, and really bend that backhand shot left to right. And funny enough, here on hole 7, Jori's actually throwing his buzz. I'm throwing my rock 3. Trying to air it out. This hole, the only mistake you can't make is going left into the bushes and trees. And I got a little bit intimidated by that backdrop. Lots of space behind the basket, didn't want to airball it. So put a little bit too much nose down. That actually ties us up going to hole 8, which I might say is the hardest hole on the course potentially, with OB left and right You have to be very precise not to fade out to find that OB left, and then that OB path on the right is equally daunting if you end up airing a forehand too high up. I tried playing more of a straight forehand with my Explorer and Yori disking down to Mako 3. Two very different ways to attack the hole. I end up finding myself just outside circle, I think, for a putt. And hole 8 is a very good birdie to get, and especially rewarding out on this track. Hole 9, we do have OB right, but this one's pretty straightforward. You have plenty of options, pretty much all lines available except for your righty backhand hyzer. So pick your poison, and this is one that you'd like to be putting close to the basket. But you also can't air it too high with one guardian branch if you're throwing it directly at the basket. I end up going a little bit deep here, making my comebacker there. Hole 10 plays as this awkward distance where it's not the furthest hole, but it really feels like a sawed-off hyzer, where mine looked to be following the fairway, but was actually going over the rough on the right side to access that basket, where Yori is actually showing the preferred line going right towards it. And as you can see, I end up catching some of that tall stuff and left myself with a long putt. Really hoping for the best, and Yori actually ended up landing a lot closer than we both would have thought off the tee, so very deceiving hole if you're not used to playing it a lot. Hole 11, plenty of danger to be found with the water wrapping across the fairway and then again behind the basket. This is one where, at the level that we're at, both trying to play a relatively straight shot just into the fairway and count on that approach really to save use strokes rather than lose it off the tee going too aggressive. And it's still a full shot with a very defined fairway, so it's a tough shape to access the basket, not one that I would be attacking. And a little bit of an errant upshot, but lucky to convert on that putt. Yori also extremely lucky there to not end up finding that water behind the basket. Thankfully this time of year the reeds were tall enough to stop again those rollaways. Moving on, our next hole. This is a short little chipper. This one used to have these tall trees around the basket, and unfortunately they were lost, so this one's turned into not as fun of a hole, I might say. So I end up being in a surprisingly tricky spot for only being a couple of meters away from the basket, having to try turbo it, and not a putting style that I'd practice, so just missing that putt there. Yori ends up finding this single tree in the middle of the fairway. Seeing that, I definitely wanted to err a little bit more on the right. Again, not the longest hole per se, but this is one where you definitely want to be progressing most of the way down, and most people will have a long putt at it unless you have the power to actually access that basket and try to get into circle 1. So a very important putt here for Yori, trying to save that par, but just coming up a little bit short. And that puts me in a 2-stroke lead over Yori, moving into hole 14. Hole 14 is the most picturesque hole on the course, and this is where I believe there was even a picture in one of the Innova calendars from this hole, but unfortunately the overgrowth has gotten a little bit out of hand, and so that made me choose for this forehand hyzer play, playing over, not wanting to challenge anything. Yori playing that straight line again with his Mako 3. and keeping that 2-stroke difference, then moving into 15. 15 plays as a mirror image of 14, a little bit longer, and so this is a chance to then air out a backhand, where I'm throwing my Explorer here on a soft pushing hyzer, and Yori playing a little bit flatter line with his Destroyer. Again, with the reeds growing in, this one was actually a blind shot off the tee, so hard to tell where exactly the basket was, but had a rough idea at least. As long as you're moving a little bit left, you should be accessing that pin. And the trees aren't in the way as much as it would look, which is completely different from hole 16. Hole 16, there's not many options, a very small gap off the tee that you have to hit. And if you want to progress to the basket, you have to hit this gap that's 2/3 down the fairway. And so I like playing this forehand hyzer flip route with my Explorer, because I feel like that's my most accurate shot for very tight gaps. And finding some trouble with right side, Yori leaking off to the left, and looks to be in a little bit of an army golf situation here. And you can just see how much or how protected this green is. Just barely missing right there on his par putt. That par that keeps me at 8 under par, and Yori taking an unfortunate bogey there. Hole 17, again, plenty of OB to be found, wrapping all around. I end up pulling my drive and just clipping the edge of this bush on the right side. The gap itself isn't as tight as it might look here on the camera, so there's no real excuse to be hitting it. And it's pretty much as straightforward as Yori made it look. The OB isn't that close to the basket, so there's a lot more space than you would think. And so, really hard to find that OB. And Yori with a great C2 putt there, bringing him back to -6. Hole 18 can look like a very simple hole off the tee, but there is some danger to be found on this hole. You have this one singular branch that's about 20 meters short of the basket, hanging in the way. If you don't clear past it, below it, there is plenty of danger to be found. Deep left of the basket, you have the water, and pin high right, you also have the water, as well as this early bush where I'm just left pitching up this blind approach and leaving myself a little bit longer of a putt than you want to be ending around on, especially considering that's for par with that water behind the basket. But with that brings us to the end of the round. Thanks for sticking around watching. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more content.